What is up? And welcome in 10,000 pitches in your ears or right in front of your face as the video is available on YouTube after the fact. But of course, if you are a tier 3 Soda Soccer super sub at patreon.com/Soda Soccer, you can tune in and are tuning in tuning in live to 10,000 pitches. You can leave questions or comments. You can kind of just get a first look at the show each week as well. So if that's something that sounds interesting to you that you might want to take in each and every week, make sure you're either upgrading your Patreon membership or heading over to patreon.com/Soda Soccer and making that happen. But either way, whether you're watching live, listening live, watching after the fact, listening after the fact, thank you so much for tuning in to another edition of 10,000 Pitches. This is episode 131. We are presented, of course, by sodasoccer.com. My name is Jeremy Rushing, and alongside me, as always, Mr. Dominic Jose Bazonio. Dom, how we doing?
I'm doing great. Apologies for not being available last week. Had some state hockey to deal with, and that was great. But glad to be available today. Lots to talk about. Lots of different exciting things to talk about. So very happy to be back.
I mean, come on, Dom. First episode of 10K Live, and you ditch us for
I don't make the schedule.
High school hockey. Come on now. I'm just kidding. With a lot of fun. You're right there on the ice at the XL Energy Center. You know, that's you know, if you're gonna miss the 10,000 Pitches podcast, at least make it cool, and you did. So I'm sure that was a lot of fun. But anyways, we're going to have a lot of fun on this week's episode. If you have not yet, leave a subscription, subscribe to the podcast, rate and review the podcast on your preferred platform as well. You can also follow us on Twitter at SodaSOC to keep up with not only what's happening at Soda Soccer, but with what's happening in the world of Minnesota soccer as well. And I mentioned the Patreon a little bit before. We have a little Patreon challenge that we're doing right now because, you know, we covered the FC Dallas match in person in Frisco for the opener. And we want to keep doing that periodically throughout the season, going out to cover road matches. You know, we're not going to be able to make it to every single one, obviously, because it's expensive to travel and we all have different things that we're doing and day jobs and all that stuff. But definitely want to try to make it a semi-regular thing this season. But in order to do that, in order to afford the travel and do that, we got to kind of up our Patreon following. So we got a little challenge going on this month for the month of March. So between now and March 21st, we want to reach 50 patrons at patreon.com/Soda Soccer. We're currently at 43. So we just need 7 more between now and the 21st. If we can do that, we will, you know, book our flight, book our hotel, do, you know, get everything we need to do to get sorted to be on site at City Park covering Minnesota United, their first ever match against St. Louis City SC on the MLS level. So make sure that if you really enjoyed the on-site coverage from Dallas and Frisco, and you want to see more of that, and you're not a patron at patreon.com/Soda Soccer, please consider doing that. If you already are a patron and you love the content, you know, tell a friend. You know, spread the word. Let people know why you enjoy so much being a patron and why it might be worth their time and their investment. So again, patreon.com/Soda Soccer. Looking for 7 more patrons at the time of recording between now and March 21st. If we can reach 50 by March 21st, we'll do everything we have to do to get out to St. Louis for that April 1st road match against St. Louis City. A very exciting St. Louis City SC team too, might I add. So check us out there. But shout out to the new patrons who subscribed this past week. Nathan, James, John, Bridget, thank you guys so much for your support. We really appreciate it. And again, if we can get 7 more of y'all in on the Patreon between now and March 21st, we're going to head out to St. Louis for that road match. All right, Dom, speaking of Minnesota United, though, let's jump right into it here. The 1-1 draw, Snowpener 2023 against the New York Red Bulls. There was a 90% chance that we'd get some snowfall, you know, before and during the match. We definitely got it. Neither coach seemed particularly happy about the snow accumulation on the pitch. Gerard Struber for New York Red Bulls in particular called it unprofessional. He compared it to a U18 youth match, that sort of thing, you know, and in asking a clarifying question, Andy Grader from the Pioneer Press sort of asked a clarifying question, sort of what he meant by that. And he meant the field conditions specifically. He thought there should have been a greater effort to get the snow off the pitch prior to kickoff. And, you know, Adrian Heath, to some extent, echoed those comments in his, saying he was disappointed with how much snow there was on the field. You it made for an exciting viewing experience. Both, I'm sure, in Allianz Field. I was in the press box, and you were there at Allianz too, Dom, for this match. I'm sure it made a cool viewing experience at home for people watching on MLS Season Pass. But the players, talking to them after the match, talking to them in training this week, they do not have a positive outlook on playing in those kind of conditions. But from a viewer's perspective, it was kind of cool.
Yeah, I guess two things to say. Obviously, not preferable conditions to play soccer. You saw that in the flow of the game. You saw that in I know in Post Loons, Eli talked about this. The passing percentages for both teams were quite atrocious for Minnesota United, particularly. That's all obviously the case. Like, it is more difficult to play particularly attractive soccer in a pitch that has, say, snow on it. I do take issue a little bit with some of the comments, like saying it's unprofessional. You could talk about the biggest leagues in the world, Premier League, for example, and there will be weekends where the pitches will be waterlogged. Like, the idea that it's unprofessional, that some snow, and by the way, I've been to other snow openers. This was the least snowy snow opener that Minnesota United has had.
Yep.
Like, a third of that field at kickoff was completely green. Like that it wasn't even really snowing. The snow that was falling, I think, was mostly coming from the roof. So I don't know. I take issue a little bit with some of the more dramatic language that was used to describe the conditions. If that's unprofessional, then I think that he has a couple other leagues to talk to about unprofessionalism. But yeah, obviously it makes it harder to play good soccer. That was very clear from start to finish. To be honest, I thought in the last, maybe 15, 20 minutes, both teams kind of got a little more used to it. But the first 15 minutes of the game were pretty rough for both teams, and certainly for their ankles. And that was clear from watching in person, and also kind of looking back at highlights. There were some moments that definitely were affected by that. So, I mean, I can empathize with the players. That's a very difficult condition to play in. I do hesitate to agree with the coaches, who aren't really complaining so much about individual players' experiences, but are more just claiming that it's, I don't know, they just don't like that there was inclement weather. But absolutely. So I guess that's my 2 cents on that part.
I thought Struber's comments were a little dramatic. I will say, though, I can see the frustration being that, as you mentioned, Dom, there really wasn't much snow falling kind of right up in that time, right up until kick and over the course of the match. So maybe, and I don't know how these processes work. I don't know. Minnesota United, for everything I've heard, has a fantastic grounds crew, has a fantastic staff to keep that field and that pitch as ready as possible for, circumstances like this, and just throughout the season, making sure it's good to go and safe to play on and all that good stuff. I did see the guys, they had like these leaf blowers, right? And they were blowing the lines to make sure you could see the lines at kickoff. And so looking back on some of the comments that were made and kind of how the snow fell during the day and stuff, I thought, well, maybe there could have been more of a sense of urgency to maybe try to do that to the entire pitch before kickoff, take them a little bit more extended period of time to try to clear off the entire pitch. But that's me just sort of speculating. That's me just sort of, trying to find maybe a way that everybody could have been made happy in this scenario. But at the same time, as you mentioned, this is not uncommon for climates like ours in Minnesota to have these situations in mid-March where you're playing in these conditions. Could MLS maybe take that more into consideration in the scheduling? Possibly. Could there be a little bit more flexibility there for matches like these where Minnesota is hosting? We're saying, okay, we'll play this match on Saturday night, but if there's a snowstorm or something like that, maybe we have the flexibility to move it up to Saturday afternoon, or move it back to Sunday afternoon, or move it up to Friday evening, or whatever that is. With the new TV deal, with it kind of almost exclusively being controlled by Apple, I could see that also being something that the league could do to take into consideration. But at the same time, this is mostly unavoidable. From a scheduling perspective, from having to play in these conditions perspective, when you have a team in Minnesota and you start your season in late February, this is kind of, you're going to get this sometimes, and you should be kind of prepared for it. And I do feel for the players as well, having to play in those situations. We saw somebody like Mickey Tapias had to be his first ever time playing in anything close to these conditions. Just really skating out there for a little bit before he finally was able to sort of trust the spikes and, kind of find his footing literally. But at the same time, it did make for an exciting viewing experience. And I think that's something anybody who was there will probably remember for a while. And ended up being a positive result, I think, all on for both teams, all things considered, to walk away with shared points. Let's get into the match itself. Lineups exact same as Dallas for Minnesota United. It was sort of that 4-2-3-1, 4-3-3 hybrid, maybe a more defensively focused 4-2-3-1, if you will. Will Trapp, Bonga Kuli-Klangwane, both starting despite missing training time during the week with nagging injuries. Mender Garcia gets the nod at striker with incumbent starter Luis Amarilla available off the bench. Of course, his first match back with the team after his successful green card appointment in Paraguay. Took him a little bit more time than previously thought to actually get back with the team. But he was available, but Mender Garcia did get the start. And then it was Zarek Valentin maintaining his starting role at right back, with DJ Taylor available off the bench once again as he recovers and is sort of on the mend from some tendonitis issues in preseason. Dom, were you surprised by this lineup at all? Like I look at Will Trapp, for example. His prognosis in the early portion of the week was not very positive. It actually seemed pretty scary. The rib injury he had with inflammation around vital organs and stuff. And the initial timeline was 1 to 3 weeks. And, so early in the week, I'm thinking there's no way we're going to see Will Trapp at all for this match against the Red Bulls. But Adrian Heath said, the pain went down significantly for him over the course of the week. And he was able to not only play in a cameo, but play over an hour and start in this match. I mean, he deserves a lot of credit for sort of gutting that out and making himself available.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was a bit surprised. There'd been quite a bit of reporting, rumor, discussion, kind of leaning towards perhaps Dotson starting or something like that, a change at the very least.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was surprised. But to your point, I actually thought he played quite well. I thought he was one of the players that seemed to have his head on his shoulders more, particularly in the first half of that game. Something that almost no one you could say about. And so I was actually pretty pleased with his performance. Looked a little more controlled, actually, frankly, than sometimes his first half performances looked, which is also strange to say about that game. But I thought he played well. I was surprised, but I thought it ended up being a smart choice. Yeah. Obviously, keeping in mind that he was available, because I thought he brought a certain amount of control, maturity to the game. Valentin, I guess there was some expectation that was a possibility because Taylor was still having a medical situation, and I know Valentin. There were some stats that were not so favorable to him, but like he had one of the lower passing percentages. But I think that's more to do with what his role was in the game. He was having to do a lot of long balls, that sort of thing, that were just not going to necessarily get to anybody. I thought he played well defensively overall, though. And Klangwane, I guess it wasn't clear to me whether or not he was going to start. It turned out to be a good decision because he gets the goal, obviously. But I thought all the guys that sort of stuck in where you might have thought they wouldn't play actually were some of the better performers, and I guess that was sort of surprising silver lining to the game.
Heath's philosophy with the lineups has always been, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like if he gets a good performance from a lineup, he's going to roll that lineup out again and see if they can do something with it. So, but from a health perspective, I was surprised about Trapp. It was a little bit unsure kind of how serious Bongi's issue was with his hamstring. Turned out to be okay there. Mender Garcia obviously getting the start up top. He scored the goal. Amarilla's kind of still working his way back with the team after that extended time in Paraguay in the preseason, or the early part of the season, I should say. So, I wasn't really surprised with the lineup considering they got that 3 points on the road against Dallas. If everybody's healthy enough to roll that lineup out again, then why not roll it out again? Right. So no surprises there with the lineup. 18th minute, though, we see Bonga Kuli-Klangwane open his account for 2023 off MNUFC's first corner of the season. That's right. No corners against Dallas, but in the 18th, they get their first corner. Fragapane puts it on a plate for Mickey Tapias. Tapias gets a great header on goal, and all the Red Bulls goalkeeper can do is really sort of just kind of paw it away, and it goes and Hlongwane Bongi is right there to sort of clean that up and put it away. And it's kind of similar to the first goal, Dom, where it kind of starts with Fragapane with the shot in the first one, with the corner in this one. There was a save, initial shot and a save, but then they're kind of in a vulture-ish fashion. More vultures instead of loons in this scenario, right around the goal to sort of clean up the rebound. I sort of asked Bongi after the match if it was really a right place, right time thing, or if it's more a mentality with this team. And he had said there is a focus on making sure you're available in or around the box, not only for crosses, not only for service, but for those rebound opportunities as well. And that's paying dividends so far.
Yeah, no, it was a really assuming that there was some planning behind it, which it seems to be the case. It was a really good use of just that second ball mentality. He was placed in a really good position to both not be in danger of being offside, but also to be ready to pounce on any sort of deflection rebound that might be created by an initial shot or header. And yeah, I mean, that's exactly what happened. I was very happy, he seemed very composed, had a really clean clinical response to the situation, get the ball in the net. And, it's interesting because I think about Mender Garcia's goal in the first week, Hlongwane's goal this week. They both scored good goals that have nothing to do with what people talk about as their strengths.
Yeah, exactly.
Mender Garcia scores a very nice deflection goal. He does a good job of getting in the net, but it's just for him standing on the edge of the box.
Yeah.
And then Hlongwane gets this sort of deflected set piece tap in. Neither of which have anything to do with the speed or the footwork that people usually kind of talk about with them. But what I do like about that is that we're getting goals that these guys wouldn't necessarily always be scoring on paper. And I think when this team is in the situation it's in offensively, in terms of the continued absence of Manuel Reynoso and all that sort of thing, that's what you need. You need guys who are going to get the goals that they aren't sort of supposed to get, quote unquote. And we're getting points from that. So, I mean, I think there's a really strong positive to that. And just a good goal overall, a good use of a set piece. And yeah, I mean, I don't think there's anything to complain about there.
I went to college in the suburbs of Chicago while the Blackhawks were on their, Stanley Cup run tirade, whatever you want to call it. And they had their coach at the time, Joel Quenneville, would call those kind of goals greasy goals. That was his phrase to use. And so when I saw that, and when I've sort of thought about how Minnesota has scored those first two goals, that's the first thing that popped in my mind was they're kind of greasy goals where, again, they're not pretty, they're not bangers, they're not showing up in any goal of the week type scenarios, but they really come from a lot of like hard work, paying attention. And as you mentioned, Dom, not freaking out when the ball is suddenly at your feet. How many times do we see that happen where the guy around the goal seems almost surprised, shocked to have the ball at their feet in that circumstance, and they whiff it, scuff it, put it 5 feet wide, 5 feet over the bar. So very, very good, and as you mentioned, and composed by Hlongwane to not sort of make that situation too big for him there, and put that away and put the Loons ahead. But set pieces giveth and set pieces taketh away for Minnesota United in this one, as the equalizer for New York comes off of a corner of their own in the 49th minute. It's Andres Reyes getting a clean header right around the edge of the 6 to equalize. We saw Dallas get, they didn't really get a lot of good opportunities in the run of play in the first game, but they did get quite a few solid opportunities, and all seemed to come off set piece and goal and corner situations. And that made me kind of worry about set piece defending a little bit. I even wrote about that and mentioned it last week on 10K, that would be something to watch out for. And lo and behold, they do concede off the corner in the 49th for that equalizer. Adrian Heath, Kamar Lawrence spoke to both of them this week. Not happy about that. Obviously, pretty disappointed to give up the equalizer in that circumstance. Kamar mentioned that he and the guys really pride themselves on defending overall, but obviously making sure you're locking down those set pieces. But Adrian Heath said it. I mean, Andres Reyes, one of the tallest guys in the field, gets a free header at the edge of the 6-yard box. When you look at that, from a coach's perspective, from a film room perspective, you're going to pause that and say, that's unacceptable, guys.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a couple of things to respond to there. Yeah, it's interesting. In that Dallas game, the only real big chance Dallas has, the only save that Dane St. Clair has to make, of course, is off a header off I believe it's a corner kick. And this game, you saw lots of open play saves from Dane. Very good performance from him, I thought overall. But the one that gets let in is kind of a similar set piece situation. It's interesting, and then Eli and Jacob talked a little bit about this on Postloons. I don't know how much Andres Reyes was planning what he did in this play, but he did something incredibly clever, either by mistake or on purpose, where he's very close to the goal. He has Arriaga on him, and Tapias is also kind of in his immediate area. He starts to move. Arriaga starts to follow, and Reyes pulls right in front of Valentin, and the guy Valentin is marking, where he's literally almost touching back to front with them. And it causes Arriaga to actually end up behind those two other guys.
It almost gets picked. If you want to, it's March Madness. You want to use a basketball term. Right. He almost gets it's like a pick situation.
And it just creates this incredibly awkward spacing where Valentin's focusing on the guy he's already marking. And all of a sudden, there's a guy in front of him. Arriaga's behind him now, trying to jump over these guys or do something. So, I have no idea whether or not Reyes meant to do that, but it turned out to be a very clever run. That created a wonderful piece of space for him to jump into and head the ball very well. And so, it's unfortunate. I guess the positive of, well, not the positive of it, but the thing to make that hurt less is that's an incredibly well worked goal. That's not a silly goal to let in. That's a guy that just did everything right.
It's a well done set piece. Absolutely.
But obviously, it's a tough moment early on in the second half. Kind of sets a weird tone for the rest of the half for Minnesota United, having to now fight back for that lead in a game where it just was simply very hard to get a good play put together. And so, it's a tough moment. It's one that I don't feel too critical of any individual defender on, but it's simply, I think, one where the Loons defense just got outsmarted a little bit and got a little unlucky with some spacing and had to pay the price for it.
Yeah, just watching the replay back, because obviously I saw it in person, but watching the replay back on Season Pass earlier this week, I didn't realize there are like 4 white shirts that are around Reyes, but they're marking other people. They're kind of running around trying to make sure that their own guy, and then Reyes just seems to rise above all of them. Like in, sometimes in cheerleading, when you have the 4 people that raise the jumper up or the flipper up or whatever you want to call it, that almost is kind of what it looked like there, where Reyes is just rising above everybody else above him or below him, to head that goal in. But well worked set piece, and obviously something that the Minnesota defense is going to be disappointed about as well. But after sort of going back and forth, long balls, prayer long balls, pretty much going, both ways all night, just trying to keep the ball off the ground as much as possible. Minnesota really seemed to find their footing literally in sort of the last 10 minutes. And this was the part of the match where the snow was basically completely gone at this point. And so you started to see Minnesota specifically really start to capitalize on that, find their footing, start to work passes on the ground, start to sort of carve up the Red Bulls defense in a way that they just couldn't because of the field conditions prior to the match. And they had a pair of good opportunities from Hassani Dotson off the bench in the latter portion of this one. He was very close to a banger on a couple occasions. Tanya Lewis-Shea even had a chance in close, but it just wasn't meant to be. And it ends 1-1. Dom, are you satisfied with the result for Minnesota? I guess I'll start there.
Yeah, I think despite the fact that this Red Bulls team hasn't had a great start to the season, they are clearly a very talented team. That's my opinion anyways. And so I think when you're playing a quality team in such unique conditions to your point in that last bit there, where you essentially can't even play soccer the way you want to.
Yeah.
At a certain point, I think a draw where each team sort of has a shining moment off a set piece, and that's kind of about it. At a certain point, I think that's acceptable. Yeah. Obviously would have preferred one of those late chances to go in, but I think Minnesota played relatively well considering the context of the game. I thought there were some bright moments. You get 4 points out of 2 games. Yep. 2 games, by the way, against 2 historically good teams. And so, I walked away from that one pretty happy with what Minnesota United's been able to do with these first 2 weeks.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. Obviously, giving up the equalizer really sort of makes you feel in a sense that it's 2 points loss, because you do score first at home, holding a lead, and going into halftime with the lead, all that. It does sort of feel a little sour in that regard. But when you take everything else into context, when you take into account the conditions, when you take into account just how good of a team Red Bulls are, and I'm with you. I mean, there's a reason why preseason they were picked to finish at or near the top of the East, be a legitimate MLS Cup contender in a lot of experts' eyes. That's not for nothing. This is a really damn good Red Bulls team. And so to come away with a point in those kind of conditions, I think, you have to look at that from a positive perspective. You could look at it as a glass half empty perspective, but I think there's more than enough opportunity to look at it in a glass half full perspective. And it's positive momentum, 4 points from 2 matches. Again, as you mentioned, against FC Dallas and Red Bulls, who are, not only historically good, but both actually considered to be pretty good this season as well. And one of those, of course, being on the road. So I think you've got to look, at these first 2 matches as a whole from a positive perspective. I'm just looking at some of the stats in this one, and we'll go good news and bad news on the stats, from this match. So we're going to start with the good news, and that was Kervin Arriaga. There was, we'll talk about the team's pass completion as a whole in a second, how this even compares to that. But Kervin Arriaga, 70% pass completion, which is really good considering. 7 clearances, won 7 of his 9 aerial duels, 5 of 8 ground duels. He's just been such an impact player for this team so far. Man of the match in the opener against Dallas. MLS Team of the Week honors there. He's not going to get that here, but I think statistically, when you look at the foot mob rating, he was Minnesota's man of the match, at least in this one. And I think just from the eye test, see him everywhere, slide challenges, just turning teams over, being that, and his distribution as well. I think just from the eye test, he was Minnesota's best player as well for the second straight match. And he's been a real positive contributor and a real game changer for a team that was really looking for anybody else to sort of step up and be that guy, whether it's in the attack or the defense for Minnesota in Ray's absence. Arriaga has been that guy through 2 matches.
Yeah, and something that I was thinking about with specifically this New York game, early on in this game, I mean, within the first, it might have even been the first 5 minutes, when everybody was still getting used to the fact that there was snow on the field, Arriaga slid off the field and actually looked hurt at one point. He slid off the side. It almost looked like he might even hit a board. I don't know whether or not he did.
He slid out of our view in the press box. Yeah. That's pretty deep. He
was down for a bit, 10, 15, seconds, but enough time where you notice he was down. There was a bit of an incident, anyways, is the point. He got up, he got back on the field. But in that moment, I see that, you see the conditions, and my worry was, is this guy not going to be able to plug into this game? Because he clearly looks out of his comfort zone with the weather, with the field conditions, and that was a point of concern. He then went on, to your point, to the stats point, to have a great game, actually, one of the better games of the 22 starters. And so what I like about Kervin Arriaga really in general, in the time that he's been at Minnesota United, is he's one of those players that has that scrap to him, that he will figure things out. He's young, he's versatile, which also means that he has lots of different pots that he's trying to fill, and that can often result in a player that has tough moments, has learning curves to deal with. But I really like that he has a certain grit that I feel like teams need, particularly in that position. And he's really bringing it this season so far. Obviously, first week he got some nominations for that, but yeah, I really liked him. I thought, statistically, obviously, he ended up being one of the better players. But I think even to the eye test, after that sort of rough little moment at the beginning of the game, he really grew into the game. He really looked determined to leave his mark on the game. So I was very happy to see him kind of continuing to grow into this team like that. I think that, this team needs every minute of Kervin Arriaga that it can get. And I was glad to see that can include in the snow.
Yeah, and you mentioned early in the match, Lewis Morgan was on a rampage for the Red Bulls early in this match, actually all the way throughout the match. And it sort of gave me shades of last season's match against the Red Bulls, or between the Red Bulls and Minnesota, where Dane St. Clair stood on his head, but Lewis Morgan had a vast majority of those chances in that match as well. So I looked this up. between last season and this season, how many total shots Lewis Morgan had against Minnesota? He had 11 total shots between last year and this year. I think he had 5 in last season's match and 6 in this one, and has yet to score on Minnesota in those 2 matches. Pretty wild. He's made such an impact and been so dangerous, but was just not able to find the back of the net. And man, he was giving Minnesota United players, fans, coaches a lot of headaches early in this one. Had 2 chances within the first 5 minutes. 2 really good chances. One in the first 30 seconds. And then another one where he chips St. Clair. There's nobody else there, but luckily the ball does sort of just drift wide of the goal. But yeah, I mean, he's been really good for Red Bulls in these matches, but really, I mean, overall just unlucky for him to really find the back of the net. This is kind of where we start the bad portion of the stats. So you might have read this from Matthew Doyle in his sort of breakdown of match day 3 on MLSsoccer.com. This kind of made the rounds on social media as well. The Loons sub 48% pass completion percentage. They're at 47.8. So like right below 48%. That's the lowest ever recorded for a single team in an MLS match. Now, obviously the snow played a major part in that. And obviously the way Minnesota was playing played a major part in that. We're, sending in long balls and hoping somebody gets on the end of it. But I do think it's something to kind of keep an eye on moving forward as well. Because Dane St. Clair, Eli Hoff mentioned this in Postlands, Dane St. Clair was not very good in his distribution either. And he's the one who can sort of really control where he's putting the ball and where he's sending those goal kicks out and who he's passing to and stuff like that. His was not very good as well. I believe it was under 30%. So that's something to just keep an eye on for this team, is their distribution effectiveness and their way to find each other and connect in the attack, and of course in the defensive third as well. And then the other one is Luis Amarilla. It's his first match back, so we can give him a little bit of the benefit of the doubt here. But 25 minutes off the bench, no shots, no successful dribbles, no chances created. You're trying to find a goal if you're Adrian Heath in this scenario. Amarilla, just wasn't really able to make an impact in that regard off the bench. Probably enough to keep Mender Garcia in that driver's seat, I would say, moving forward. We'll have to see what the lineup decisions are against Colorado. But striker situation still very much up in the air. But I don't know if this is really the match to take a lot from in that regard either.
Yeah, that's fair. Both because of Amarilla's, the context of him arriving, and also just the match itself. But I agree, though, I was not particularly impressed by his cameo. Mm-hmm. And I don't see any reason why Mender Garcia shouldn't just start the next game. He didn't score in this one, obviously, but I still thought he had some moments, and obviously did well in the first game. For me, you go with the guy that's getting the job done, and that's Mender Garcia right now.
We'll look ahead in just a second, but I do kind of want to end on this, and it is a positive note from me for Minnesota. Is it looks like this team, with Adrian Heath and the players, is really starting to develop both a tactical and just a collective identity without Reynoso. You can see what they're trying to do tactically on the field. There is an intentionality to, we're going to be more defensively shaped. We're going to press. We're going to press with our defensive midfielders, and we're going to try to force turnovers close to the midline and maybe even in the attacking half. But if we're not able to get that, if those lines are broken, we trust our back line to be able to hold things down and not, let in easy goals, let in, really be solid at the back if that initial line of pressure is broken by the opposing team. In a way that's very similar to how this 2019 team operated as well. Ozzy Alonso was really relied upon in the 6 to be that first line of defense, very forward first line of defense, if you will. And we kind of see that with Kervin Arriaga and Will Trapp as well, as they're kind of sitting up closer to midfield, but the pressure on opposing teams, making it very hard for them to get across in their own attacking half themselves, is definitely something that I see an intentionality from with Adrian Heath, and the way that he is putting this team together. It's defensively shaped in a 4-2-3-1 where you don't see Robin Lod as that, real hyper attacking midfielder. He is playing a little bit more defensive in that central midfield role, but the defensive pressure is there. And, the pressing up from a defensive perspective is there as well. And then talking to some of the guys in training this week, and just my impressions overall from seeing the guys together, both on the field and at the NSC as well. This team really likes being around each other. Like there's a lot of laughing, a lot of smiling, a lot of just enjoyment being had on the training ground. And Kamar Lawrence used the word togetherness this week when talking about what their identity looks like right now. He said, they're sort of playing for one another, but they're also holding each other accountable. He mentioned that there's sort of an extra expectation on what you're going to bring in training and on game day, an extra level of accountability that these players are holding each other to, and an extra level of quality that these players are holding each other to. He said, I think he finished this quote by saying, and I'm paraphrasing here, but it has to be a team effort from us. And, they've done a pretty good job of that so far.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think if there's one thing that it feels like this team is doing well game to game so far, is it's operating as a group, as a team, having each other's back. That mentality seems to be there in spades. So that's wonderful to see. It's wonderful to see that despite the drama off the field with Reynoso, despite the questions, despite the tactical issues that creates, to see a group that clearly is just focused on being a group is really reassuring. And I think it's a huge part of why you get these scrappy results, but well fought results that Minnesota United is getting.
Yeah, and I asked Kamar this week if the Ray not being here sort of has sort of instigated this collective unity. It's sort of brought the team together. And he kind of dismissed the question, but I think there is something to be had from just a human psychology perspective. Like when you go through adversity, when you and a group of other people sort of go through adversity together, you are more likely to come together and be for one another, be there for one another, and help one another out in that particular scenario. So we're kind of seeing that play out with Minnesota, both on and off the field so far, which is really cool to see. What's not cool to see, I mean, it's cool to see, but it's cool and not cool at the same time. Let's say that. National team call-ups. Once again, for some reason, Major League Soccer is playing its schedule through an international break this month. And Balloons will be without 6 key pieces, 5 starters for the match against Vancouver. Robin Lod is leaving for Finland, Michael Boxall for New Zealand, Dane St. Clair for Canada, Kervin Arriaga and Joseph Rosales for Honduras, and then Bongi Hlongwane for South Africa. So that rounds out the first teamers. Something really cool, though, on the MNUFC 2 side is, of course, Jesse Kahn will be representing Trinidad and Tobago during this window as well. And again, all the first teamers will be missing that March 25th home match against Vancouver. And Heath actually mentioned he may make decisions in Colorado with this in mind as well, sort of saying that, the guys who we're going to have to rely upon to sort of replace the absences against Vancouver, are more likely to get a rest or get a night off against Colorado, so they don't pick up any knocks, they don't pick up any injuries. So they are for sure available for that match, where they'll probably have to start against Vancouver, considering all those absences. So, interesting sort of chess being played, or interesting sort of look ahead from Heath there, where, yes, we're going to be missing these guys for Vancouver, but I might have to adjust my roster the week ahead of time, to make sure that these guys are available for that match.
Yeah, that is interesting. The positive side, of course, always for any team that's unhappy about losing players to the national team call-ups is just the fact that, of course, all the other teams are having that too, right? So,
well, it means you got a good team, right? I mean, if you're missing 6 guys for national team duty, it means you have 6 guys worthy of representing their countries on that stage, right?
So, that note, very true. And then also, Minnesota United is just going to have to approach the Whitecaps and see, well, what gaps do they have from people they're losing? Mm-hmm. I know for a fact they have multiple people that have call-ups. So starters who have call-ups. So looking at those weaknesses, looking at how it's affecting Minnesota, and making the most of that. I agree that I'm not a huge fan of MLS playing through the international windows, but if you're a team in that situation, you have to make the most of the fact that everybody's dealing with it.
Yep.
And if someone's not dealing with it, to your point, it means that they have managed to put together a roster with no people that no country wants. Exactly. Which I guess is also okay if you're going to play them. But So, you gotta find the silver lining of that. I think Minnesota is capable of that. I think that there are talented players not in that list that can step up and put together performances. So we'll have to see. And for what it's worth, if you're going to be playing a team on that window, the Whitecaps, who are very much trying to find themselves right now, probably not the worst team to be playing. So we'll have to see what that looks like.
This is the one result DC United will get all season, just during the international break. No, I'm just kidding. They might have gotten a result already. Actually, I haven't paid too close attention. But anyways, quick look at the Rapids as we head into the Colorado match this weekend. They are going through some injury issues. Lalas Abubakar Keita, Diego Rubio, Dantuma Torre, all out until at least early April with various injuries. For Rubio, obviously the most marquee name of the bunch, he has a knee injury that has him out until mid-April. They're also, as a team, goalless through 3 matches, outscored 5-0 so far in 2023. This past weekend versus San Jose specifically, 6 shots, none on target, just a .49 expected goals. And only one player via FootMob rated as a 7 or above for this match for Colorado, and that was Brian Acosta. So, has not been the best start so far for the Rapids.
It has not. Now, obviously, the elephant in the room is that in the past, similar situations have developed, and then the Rapids have beat us 3-1.
Yep.
With a random red card somewhere in there. So, we'll have to wait and see. This matchup is always annoyingly chaotic and weird. But for what it's worth, Minnesota United coming into it with the better momentum. The Rapids not performing well in any particular way, including at home already. At least one of those games is at home. So I think that's a hopeful note for Minnesota. Hopefully, we'll see the Loons sort of take control of this matchup in a way that they haven't in the past.
Yep.
And if they do, to your point earlier about, the first 2 games, is this a good start? If you get a win at Colorado and that's your first 3 games, I think that's a great start. Yes. Now, if you lose or something, then maybe not. But if you get 7 points, 2 of those on the road or 6 of those on the road, and that home draw against a good Red Bulls team, I think that's a great start.
It is.
So it's kind of a matter of, does Minnesota United kind of take control of this game, ride through it, get their goals, stay defensively sound, make the most of Colorado's hardships. If they do, which I think they're capable of, I think we could have, a very, very happy conclusion to week 4 of the MLS season for Minnesota United.
Yeah, and not to look ahead too far, but when you look at the next match against Vancouver, where Minnesota will be missing, a handful of starters, the Whitecaps are looking pretty vulnerable in the early going as well. So when you look at kind of what Adrian Heath has sort of indicated that he's going to do here, he's going to kind of rotate his subs out against Colorado, his first choice subs out against Colorado, in anticipation for having to rotate his starters out against Vancouver. I talked about this in today's Loons Daily newsletter, but it kind of presents like a breakthrough or breakdown scenario is what I called it. Like, either this is going to be genius, they're going to get results in both matches, he's going to play it perfectly, and they're really going to continue that momentum into April, or they're sacrificing points in both matches by sitting out your first choice subs against Colorado, maybe having to bring on somebody who's a little less seasoned as far as MLS is concerned, or maybe having to maybe he just rolls the starters out for 90 minutes. That could be an option too. We've seen he do that plenty of times in the past. Maybe that, kicks Minnesota in the butt in the later going, and they give up a late goal to either equalize or even lose that game against Colorado. And then all of a sudden, now you're going into a Vancouver match where you're going to be missing 5 starters, and you're vulnerable in that match as well. So this could go a lot of ways, and I feel like we'll learn a lot more about this Minnesota United team, especially their depth, over these next couple weeks. But it's going to be very interesting to see if Heath is pressing the right buttons with this, or if we come out of these next 2 matches with that momentum just completely halted.
Yeah, it's going to be a really interesting test. I mean, this is always what happens with the MLS season, just the nature of it. It tries to pack in the action, and it tries to test teams. I think we're going to, like you said, learn a lot about Minnesota United across these 2 games. But I feel like we've seen things in the first 2 games to give hope that what we're going to learn is going to be good news.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, this is a challenge that Minnesota United's going to have to get used to, because there's other competitions coming along that are going to clog the schedule up more and all these sorts of things. So other international breaks. So I think this is going to be a learning curve that the team has to deal with. And I'm optimistic that we've seen some things in the first 2 games that sort of suggest that they're capable of dealing with it.
So I think we are both pretty satisfied with what we've seen from Minnesota United so far. I think both pretty intrigued as to what these next 2 weeks will look like for the Loons. Saturday against Colorado, 7:30, or excuse me, it'll be an 8:30 p.m. Central Time kickoff because it's in Mountain Time. So it'll be 7:30 Mountain Time, 8:30 Central on MLS Season Pass. And then the following week, Vancouver will be right back home at Allianz Field. 7:30 kickoff. Of course, that's the match where a handful of starters, 6 total players on the first team, will be missing due to international duty. Post Loons coming away after both of those matches as well. All right, taking a quick break here. We will be back with lower league news. Minnesota Super Cup schedule has been released. MNUFC 2 schedule has been released. More news on Michael Vang and more. That is coming up in just a minute here on 10K. But right now, got to shout out some friends of ours. And those friends are from Stimulus Athletic. Jason Mora, of course, former Minnesota United player, owns and operates Stimulus Athletic. And he sort of used his experience as a player to kind of find the gaps in the marketplace. Where are teams or apparel companies lacking in what they're providing these players as far as game gear and apparel goes? And to sort of use that to sort of launch Stimulus Athletic and provide teams, organizations, the quality game gear and apparel they deserve. If you are the coach or an owner of a lower league team, if you're a coach or an owner of a youth club team, whatever level of soccer you're at, and you're heading into your summer season, and you're just kind of looking at your team's jerseys and apparel, and you're just like, man, this is kind of bland. Like this is, this isn't the look that I want for my club, but I don't know what else to do. Your team deserves quality jerseys and apparel, and that is accessible with Stimulus Athletic. They've worked with Minneapolis City. They have worked with Tulsa Athletic. They have worked with the Anguillan national team. They have worked with the American Outlaws, providing game gear and apparel at affordable prices. And they can do the same for you and your club. And it costs you nothing just to have that initial conversation and see what Stimulus Athletic can do for you. So go to stimulusathletic.com and click that Get Started button. And when you go through the form, there's a section there is how did you hear about Stimulus? I ask that you please tell them that Jeremy and Dom from 10,000 Pitches sent you. Again, quality game gear at affordable prices. That is what Stimulus Athletic is all about. So if you're a coach or an owner of a club listening to this podcast, and that sounds like something you might be interested in, check them out. Stimulusathletic.com. Stimulusathletic.com. Make sure you tell them that the 10,000 Pitches podcast sent you there. All right, lower league news time. Let's get into it. Minnesota Super Cup schedule is out. And in Group A, we have Minneapolis City taking on Minnesota United U19s on May 5th. That's kicking off the tournament. Elsewhere in Group A, we have Duluth FC and Minnesota United U19s on June 7th. And then the Minneapolis City and Duluth FC Derby revived for that July 18th group matchup. In Group B, we have Med City and Vlora taking on each other for the first time ever on May 17th. St. Croix and Med City on June 6th, and then Vlora and St. Croix on June 21st. Top 2 teams from each group will advance to the semifinals. First place from Group A plays second place from Group B, and vice versa. Those semifinals will happen between July 21st and 23rd, and then the final will be on July 29th. I think one of the things that stands out to me here, Dom, is they're sprinkling these matches in basically the entire schedule, not trying to play them all at the same time, which I think is a little bit more advantageous for these clubs, and gives you the best opportunity to have all the players from these clubs available for all these matches when you're sprinkling everything in over a 3-month period.
Yeah, absolutely. That was, I think, one concern that I had noted prior to this was how they were going to fit all this in. And if you log it all into the end of the season or end of the summer, to your point, are these teams going to even have half their rosters anymore? And so this is a smart way of avoiding that, which is that, the latest of these games will essentially be happening sort of at the end of like the playoff picture for most of these leagues. And I think that's a great way of dealing with. Otherwise, you got to negotiate between 4 different leagues. How you're going to find a month. So, yeah, I think this is a smart way of doing it. It's a fun way to sort of mix in, almost like it's a domestic cup for the the leagues. So you got a game here and there that you're playing. I love that. I don't know whether or not Minnesota United was interested in hosting any of these games, but they're not. But I think that's actually great because it means that these other teams get the benefit of hosting Minnesota United. So, Duluth get to host Minnesota United, Minneapolis City get to host Minnesota United. And even if it's the U19s, there's a sort of a cool sort of marketing kind of bump to that I think is fun. And of course it's fun to see Minneapolis City and Duluth play again. I guess the lower league E Cup won't have the only version of that.
No, it won't. Anymore. We actually get that on the field.
We had to see real players do it.
Hopefully it's as exciting as the E Cup match was.
Yeah. Well, to be honest, that'll be hard to achieve. But no. So that group is awesome and blockbuster. The way that's all going to match up. Really looking forward to that. Group B in its own right is really interesting. I think it's going to be really fun. You have 3 teams who've never really played each other before. There might be an off the books friendly I don't know about, but competitively they've never played each other before. And they're all high achievers in their own right. Obviously, Med City winning the NPSL North last year. Valora consistently being high achieving, very close to winning their conference in the UPSL last year. And St. Croix, the highest achieving Minnesota side in USL League 2 last year. Both teams, of course, had tough years, but they did do the best of the two. And so they're bringing that in, and all the new energy and dedication they have to this season, they're bringing that to this tournament. I think that's going to be really fun. 3 teams from very different parts of the state as well, from Stillwater, Rochester, and Burnsville, more or less for Valora. So a really nice sort of triangle of 3 places facing off. Yep. But yeah, I really look forward to seeing how this tournament plays out. I agree the structure is probably the best option that they had for it. And I think when we get to those semifinals and final, I think those are going to be really exciting to see some of these cool matchups that, by the way, you could see potentially a Minneapolis City Med City reunion as well, or a Valora Minneapolis City game. Those teams have their own histories against each other, or all these sorts of things that could be really fun. So I continue to be excited for the tournament, and the way these groups and the schedule are kind of laying out make me all the more excited.
Yeah, and with these matches being a little bit spread out, I think it makes it a little bit more accessible for guys like us who are just kind of not casual, but just fans of the lower league soccer scene overall, to maybe go out and check out some of these games that they're not chunked into all at one time. So hopefully that's the same for a lot of you listeners out there to go out and take in the Minnesota Super Cup this summer. Very interested to see what kind of venue we get for the final on July 29th as well. Allianz Field, TCO, the NSC, I think would be cool in its own right as well. So we'll have to wait and see. But very, very exciting. The more info we get about the Minnesota Super Cup, the more excited I get for the tournament. So I'm sure there's more to come as we get close, about a month and a half away now from it kicking off. Other lower league news. Dom, you are our resident Michael Vang reporter. You have the boots on the ground reporting on Michael Vang. Tell us what's going on with him.
My new official title at Soda Soccer. You're going to have to change the About Us page. So really cool stuff going on with Michael Vang right now. Played last season with the Columbus Crew as many people may recall, in MLS Nets Pro. He's since signed for Portland Timbers too, also on MLS Nets Pro. So that's where he's going to be playing his club ball. But even more exciting maybe than that is that he's actually gotten this huge opportunity to go train, and he's expected to take part in actual games with the Lao national team, who are playing 2 friendlies at the end of March in preparation for the qualifiers for both the World Cup and the AFC Asian Cup are both at the end of this year. So all those teams are playing friendlies spring, summer to prepare for that. He's in the pool for those friendlies. He's out there in Laos training, getting to know the coach, getting to know the players. So it's really a cool, huge opportunity for him, both between obviously getting a new home to continue his club career and also this international opportunity. to well, certainly raise his profile, but also to achieve some sort of career dreams.
Yeah.
And so it's really awesome to see a guy that I've been covering since he got picked out of a Forward Madison tryout to get to this point is frankly a lot bigger than I ever predicted I would be seeing for him. But he's continues to be very ambitious and hardworking, and I think the Lao national team, who are it's very tough confederation, the AFC, to thrive in when you have so many sort of titans around you. I think they're probably looking to make the most of diaspora talent and bring some new faces in, see what they can do with talent that isn't already in Laos. And they're making the most of that opportunity, obviously, with him. And I know they've also brought in players in the past who live in places like France. And so, just a really cool opportunity for him. Really looking forward to that. We'll have some notes, I'm sure, on Twitter or the site when those games happen, particularly if he plays. And hopefully some sort of feature down the road. But yeah, just a big shout out to him. St. Paul native, Harding alum, Shattuck St. Mary's alum as well.
Yep.
It's just really cool to see his story continue to take interesting turns and swerves.
Yeah. And it's, again, the opportunity for him to train with the Lao national team is just incredible. And hopefully maybe he can work his way into a match day roster or something. I think that would be pretty awesome. And then obviously staying in MLS Next Pro, sort of staying in the pyramid, if you will. Here in American soccer is always positive as well. And all it takes is the right opportunity at the right time for somebody to really kind of step in and make that impact. We saw him do that in his first year with Forward Madison back in 2020. And we'll see if he can, kind of return to maybe a similar impactful form in the world of professional soccer with Timbers too. But obviously all the best to him moving forward. And we'll have all your Michael Vang updates. I should say we'll have. Dominic will have all your Michael Vang updates as they progress here moving forward. Augsburg's men's team are in the middle of a trip around Costa Rica. I actually went on my honeymoon to Costa Rica a few months ago, and it was beautiful. So I'm a little jealous of them right now. But they're visiting locations and playing friendlies against local teams. So that's got to be a really cool experience for everyone there. Both Duluth FC and Forward Madison have made the quarterfinals of the lower league E-Cup. Minneapolis City and Spam FC did not make it past the group stage in the first cup bracket, if you will. But there is sort of a challenge cup bracket, which allows them to keep playing games and battle for a consolation prize at the end, if you will. So very cool to see all those teams still competing. But man, Ufasa himself has been really living up to the billing for Duluth FC so far. Some really exciting matches, some late winners for him. And then Evan Warwick from Forward Madison doing his thing as well. I think these two got to collide at some point in this tournament. And I think that would just, that would almost explode Twitter in the world of Northland soccer if we get Ufasa and Duluth against Evan and Forward Madison. But just what a successful run for a lot of the local teams here, both in Minnesota and Wisconsin over the course of this tournament. And now they're in the quarterfinals. There are two left in Duluth and Forward Madison. And I see no reason why, either of them can't go all the way and take it home.
For sure. And I think they're on corresponding sides of the bracket, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, so it'd have to be the final.
They could meet in the final, which would be awesome. That would be worth some proper coverage from us in a moment, even day of.
Absolutely.
But other content on the lower league cup surely on the way, by the way, once it's over. But really fun to watch those runs. I didn't see the Duluth Bateau game because I had a game to cover. I afterwards watched, they posted some clips and all that kind of stuff, but it seemed like the hell of a game. I think he won 6-5 or 5-4 or something like that. It was a back and forth. So that tournament's been super fun to keep tabs on. To track back for a moment, really cool opportunity for the Augsburg men's soccer team. I don't know all the details of how this trip came to be, but I just know that they've been posting. If you go to their Instagram or their Twitter, I think you'll see some pictures. They've been going around. They've visited the facilities of some pro teams, and then they've been playing friendlies with some local teams as well. And it seems like a really cool opportunity for those guys to develop and just see more of what's out there and learn more about the game in different environments. So very coul for them.
Yeah, very cool indeed. And again, more on the E-Cup, as you mentioned, as it moves along. And if we do get Duluth and Forward Madison in the final, you will be seeing a ton of coverage from us on that one for sure. Dakota Fusion have made their first few announcements for NPSL signings for 2023. Defender Riku Kuwanu and goalkeeper Jamie Colville will be with the Fusion in 2023. Colville also plays for Northland College in Ashland, Wisconsin. So very cool opportunity for Dakota to kind of build on what they did last year. Carter and I talked a little bit about this last week where, obviously Duluth and Med City are kind of considered to still be in that top tier, but with some of the performances that we saw from those mid-table teams last season in the NPSL, there is an opportunity for somebody to sort of get back, climb up into that top tier alongside Duluth and Med City. And based off what Dakota was able to do last year, we'll see how they're able to build their roster for 2023. But if they can build off that momentum, they could very well be that team to find themselves, up in that upper echelon.
Oh, for sure. I think, I myself underestimated the Fusion last year. I think that people should heavily avoid doing that this year. I think, you have the fact that Sam Winning is returning as coach. You're going to have that continuity on the sideline. Now you have a couple pieces, at the very least, potentially more than these two, but coming back for continuity on the pitch is always very important. And by the way, you got some really interesting, hardworking players. Colville, for example, stands out to me because he signed onto the team last year, and my expectation was not that he was going to be starting. Northland College was not of the level of some of the other players he was competing against. And so I was assuming that he was going to be there as the backup. He ended up playing quite a few matches. He, for instance, played the entirety of that win over Duluth FC late on that sort of decided, in a way, the title race. And that, at the very least, is what the Fusion are now. They are, at the very least, a team now that has input on who wins the North. If they can step it up, if they can take advantage of a team like Duluth or Med City, potentially they can upgrade that to competing for those top two spots, competing for a playoff spot, maybe competing for the title as well. But I think that's a really exciting program coming into 2023. I think it's one to watch. I think any game they play against Duluth or Med City is immediately going to be mark the calendar game, because that's not a for sure for anybody. So glad to see that there's going to be some continuity, because they brought so many people in last year. I mean, it was almost an entirely new roster last year. So good to see that some of those guys are going to be coming back. And really looking forward to seeing what they can do with a second year with Winning in charge, with some of these guys coming in the sort of new face of the Dakota Fusion.
So one last note on the lower league front, and then we'll get to our picks presented by BettorEdge. But Forward Madison, there is a lot of hype around this Mingos team heading into 2023. They have made some significant additions to their team. And one pivot that they've made with their roster construction that's a little bit different than the last couple of years is they're bringing in USL League One experienced players. If anybody who's been following the Talking Flock podcast or just following Forward Madison overall over the last couple of years, they have taken over the last couple of years the route of signing next level type players with MLS experience, players with USL Championship experience, players directly from USL Championship going down to play with Forward Madison. And that has not necessarily bared any fruit for this team over the last couple of years. And when I think about this, I think about it in the context of MLS. Like, there are teams that bring in, a who's who of international talent, but then struggle. Right. Because MLS is just a different animal, right? It's a completely different animal. And the teams that perform the best are the teams that bring in that right combination of MLS experienced players, young talent, and players who have experience in other places, maybe at higher levels. If you can kind of plug all those right pieces in the right spots, that is how you build kind of that perfect roster. And I think you're kind of seeing that in the lower leagues too, specifically USL League One. They brought in this attacker, Christian Cheney, who's expected to just light USL League One on fire this year. Derek Gebhardt has come back. Of course, that's a name a lot of people might recognize as somebody who's been a huge impact player for this team over the last couple of years. There seems to be an intentionality with how they're building this roster. So if you're just kind of a casual follower of the Mingos, or you've heard of Forward Madison, but you haven't quite looked into them, Pay close attention to the Mingos in 2023. I don't want to overhype it too much, but this could be a team on paper. This team is seen as a real contender for the league title. I would just say that. So that is something to consider. They had a really good friendly against DePaul University over the weekend. Got a lot of guys in, a lot of guys scores. Evidently, they've had a really good group of trialists this season as well. So yeah, really cool, really exciting stuff happening in Madison on the Wisconsin side as well. So definitely pay close attention to the Mingos if you can this season. All right, Dom, picks time. Presented by our friends over at BettorEdge, BettorEdge.com. And go to BettorEdge.com/loons, and you'll actually get $20 in your account for free. It'll just show up. Boom, $20. You get to do whatever you want with that. You can use free money to place wagers and bet on BettorEdge, but if you don't want to do that, that's totally fine. They have this like Edge coin where you can, it's basically play money. It's basically free money. You can make picks, make bets, and you don't have to waste some real money in the process. So again, BettorEdge.com/loons will get you that $20 deposit in your account right there. All right, let me bring up BettorEdge here. Let me see. Nope, that's not what I want. Nope, that's not what I want. How do I present? There we go. There we are. Okay. Here is our look at BettorEdge.com and the picks or the matchups for match day 4 in Major League Soccer. And Dom and I are each going to we're going to start with Minnesota United. We're going to make a pick based off the Minnesota United match. Colorado is favored, and the over-under is once again 2.5 total goals. So Dom and I can either bet on Colorado to win, we can bet on Minnesota to win, we can bet on over 2.5 total goals, or we can bet under 2.5 total goals. Again, Colorado is the favorite, so you'll make a little less money if you bet on the Rapids. Minnesota, the underdog, you make a little bit more money off your bet if you bet on Minnesota. All right, Dom, hit us with your pick. Who are you going with in this one, or what are you going with in this one, I should say?
I'm going with Minnesota to win. They may have Colorado as favorites, but I don't. I think that this is a prime game for Minnesota United to win. As far as goals go, it's hard to say, but I'm going with the Minnesota win.
Yeah, I am as well. I think they'll play with a little extra intensity, especially those players who are going to be off on international duty. Might give a little bit extra in this one in anticipation for not playing in the Vancouver match the following week. Colorado, very vulnerable, has really not shown me anything, not shown me that they're even as good as Minnesota so far this season. Actually, coming into the season, just on paper, I thought Minnesota was a better team than Colorado, and they've definitely showed that so far in the early going. So I see no reason why Minnesota can't go on the road and get 3 points. Again, 3 or 4 red cards notwithstanding there. But I'm going with Minnesota as well. So again, this is pretty easy to submit here. You go to BettorEdge.com, you make your pick. I'm using EdgeCoin. I bet 40 EdgeCoin. I'll get 96.40 back. Again, you kind of do the math based off that ratio, based off what real money you would bet. If I were to bet $40 in real money and Minnesota were to win, I would get 96.40 in return. That's how that works. And again, with each bet you make, you can also give to Jason Zucker's Give 16 Foundation as well, which is a really good charity to give to as well. So a lot of good stuff over here at BettorEdge. Very easy to make your wagers and make your bets. Again, if you're not comfortable using real money, they have the EdgeCoin feature for you. And I'm also going with Minnesota United, if I didn't make that clear as well. All right, now it's time to kind of go around the league. We're going to present our locks and our upset picks of the week. I hit my lock of the week last week with New York City over Orlando. I am going to stick with New York City at Yankee Stadium once again over DC United. DC, while they might be better this year, I don't anticipate that they are going to be good this year. And NYCFC at Yankee Stadium is just such a weird environment for opposing teams to play in that even though you're looking at not a lot of return on your investment on this particular wager, I still think it's worth it. Being that it's against DC United and being that it's at Yankee Stadium, I just think that gives NYC such a big advantage.
Nice. My lock is, and I know I'm going to say this, and all the Violette fans in our audience are going to go, but but I'm going to say Austin win at Houston.
Mm.
I CCL madness aside, and by the way, huge congratulations to Violette.
Oh, what an awesome story.
Yeah, but that aside, in MLS, well, first of all, Houston Dynamo have had a horrible start, and I don't see that game particularly better. Secondly, the fact that it's a home game for them, to be perfectly frank, I don't think matters much because that team struggles to have anything I would call home atmosphere. Thirdly, I think Austin are actually very good, and they put themselves in an incredibly bad position in the first leg of that CCL game by just like sending half of the B team to play that game.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's largely not reflective of the quality of their actual MLS roster. I think their actual MLS roster is actually fantastic. So I think that Texas rivalry game, I think they're going to go to Houston and they're going to show them what's up. So I'm going with Austin on that one.
All right. I'm kind of with you there. I think Austin is going to be a team to beat, in this particular match, but I also think maybe that the Violette loss could sort of light a fire underneath them. We shall see. My upset of the week is I'm going SKC on the road at FC Dallas. I have really not been too impressed with what FC Dallas has brought so far this season. They just have looked a little bit vulnerable at times. A 1-1 draw against Vancouver, even though it's in Vancouver, does not do anything to impress me about what FC Dallas are doing so far this season. It doesn't show me that they've come anywhere close to resolving the conundrum that is why this talented front line can't score more than one goal in a match. And I think SKC, while they've, results-wise haven't quite put the pieces together yet, they are, from an attacking standpoint, even without Johnny Russell, are still generating shots. They're generating attacking output. It hasn't quite turned into goals yet, but I think that XG chicken is coming home to roost for them a little bit in a positive way. And I think they'll get it done on the road against Dallas. Now, again, you might notice if you're looking at this, why isn't there a draw option on here? Because the way BettorEdge operates, so they are a social betting platform. So you're betting head to head against other people when you're making these bets. And when you bet head to head, you cannot have three different options. It just doesn't really work. Right. What happens is if there's a draw, it's a push and you get your money back on your bet. And it's almost as if you never made the bet in the first place. So there is that catalyst to it as well, where if you win, you make the money. If there's a draw on whichever bet you make, you get your money back. So, but I'm going SKC as the underdog against FC Dallas. Again, I'm far more encouraged by what Kansas City has shown so far this season than what Dallas has shown. And even without Johnny Russell, I think this could go Kansas City's way. And I think they could get a couple goals that they, honestly deserve based off their performance without him so far this season.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And, to be honest, SKC is kind of one of those teams that you can never really count out on making a run in MLS. Mm-hmm. So you always have to have them in mind when you're looking at matchups. My upset, and I know this one is probably going to sound a little silly to some people, but I want to point out for what it's worth that week one, I got both of mine right. I got Miami over Philadelphia and the Revolution over Houston, I think. I think the Whitecaps are going to beat the Galaxy. So I know that sounds a little bizarre. Both teams have had horrible starts. The Galaxy, in part, dealing with injuries, particularly that of Chicharito, and that obviously has huge impact. That injury is expected to still be at play at this game. Mm-hmm. And I just think Vancouver, they've been having to deal with, of course, balancing CCL with MLS play. They've gone through that initial CCL tie now onto the next stage of that tournament. They have a little more room to breathe, a little more focus on MLS. I actually think their roster has, when they have everybody, which they won't on international break, when they have everybody, I actually think there's a fair bit of talent on this team. And I just think it feels like it's in the storybook for them to travel to Los Angeles and upset the order of the Western Conference a little bit with the win at the Galaxy. So that is my upset pick.
That's that would certainly be an upset, Dominic.
It certainly would be.
Kind of like I'm not encouraged by FC Dallas. I'm really not encouraged by the Galaxy so far. I think they've been underperforming. So, I think there could be an opportunity, but also, Dom, you got to think of it this way too. If Vancouver is able to win against the Galaxy, they'll be coming into that Minnesota match with a ton of confidence.
That's true. But all the guys they used to beat the Galaxy with will probably be good.
That's fair. That's fair. All right. So those are our picks presented by BettorEdge. Again, BETTOR edge.com/loons gets $20 in your account for free. You may ask, Jeremy, betting's illegal in Minnesota. How am I able to do this? It's a community social betting platform, which means BettorEdge is not a sports book. They do not profit off of your loss. What they profit of is a lot of people going on BettorEdge and betting against one another and betting with one another and making it a community social betting atmosphere. That is BettorEdge's model. That is what makes it different than a sports book. It's a really cool thing that Greg and the guys at BettorEdge are doing. And again, you have the opportunity to bet on MLS, Champions League, Premier League, you name it, they got it over at BettorEdge. Maybe not like the Danish Premier League, but all the big ones. So check them out. BETTOR edge.com/loons. You can either bet with us or against us on our Minnesota United picks, on our MLS picks as a whole, or you can enter our weekly MLS Pick'em contest. It's a winner-take-all contest. So the more people who get entered, the bigger the payout at the end. I believe it's $5 to enter the MLS Pick'em contest each week. And again, the winner gets the whole pot. I think last week we had 6 people in the pot, so the winner got $30. So if that sounds interesting to you, again, you'll get $20 free in your account. So you can play the MLS Pick'em contest 4 times without really having to actually pay anything. So make that happen. BETTOR edge.com/loons, and you'll get that $20 deposit in your account. Thanks to our friends over at BettorEdge for making that possible. All right. Now I got to transition us back to what we were doing, Dom. Give me a second here. It's my first time. Okay. Got to do this and then do this. And now we're back.
There we go.
All right. Dom, any parting words before we get out of here?
We'll have another, I guess we'll have another episode up before the international break actually starts. But just because it was a huge topic of conversation today, international soccer is great. I know people like to hate on it because their team doesn't get to play during it or whatever, although Minnesota United does. But national team soccer is fantastic. And if you don't already pay attention to it, I really, really suggest you do. In this Nets break, you've got CONCACAF to look at if you want. U.S. is playing, for example. You've got I think African Cup of Nations qualifying. You got Euro qualifying. There's all kinds of South American, Asian teams playing friendlies. You've got all kinds of stuff going on, all kinds of fun teams playing, all kinds of fun matchups. So it's going to be on anyways. I really suggest giving it a shot, finding a game you want to check out, because international soccer is wonderful.
It is. It's a lot of fun. And you're right. People either hate it because their team's not playing during it, or they hate it because their team is playing during it.
Exactly.
Either way. But yeah, no, it's a good time. I enjoy watching me some international soccer, but I also do enjoy, whenever the Minnesota United is off during international breaks, I also kind of like to use it as a time to maybe step away a little bit from being just submerged in it all the time. But I always find myself coming back to it because, I'm addicted. So that's what happens. All right. Big thanks to everybody who's supporting us. Before we get out of here, though, we do have one more partner of ours to shout out, and that is our partners over at Pentz Homes, PENTZ homes.com. Nate, of course, I mean, if you're on Twitter and you follow Minnesota United or you follow Minnesota soccer, you know who Nate Pentz is. Huge supporter of Minnesota soccer as a whole and Minnesota United as well. And he puts his money where his mouth is in that regard. Lends his direct support to Minneapolis City with sponsorships, to Minnesota Aurora with activations, to a lot of other, to Equal Time Soccer, our friends over at Equal Time. They support them as well. And of course, they do the same for us here at sodasoccer.com. They support soccer clubs, they support soccer coverage, but they're also damn good realtors, ladies and gentlemen. This is not just a charity thing. If we're going to go over and check out the folks over at Pentz Homes, they have helped, hundreds, if not thousands of people in or around the Twin Cities buy a new house, sell their current home, do both. And I haven't heard or seen a single person who has been unhappy with their experience with Pentz Homes in that process. So check them out, pentzhomes.com. If you're in that situation where you're looking to buy, looking to sell, looking to do both, believe me, I know firsthand that is an extremely stressful process. Let Nate and his team take as much of that stress as humanly possible off your shoulders. Again, pentzhomes.com, or if I've sold you here, just email Nate directly, Nate, N-A-T-E, at pentzhomes.com. Big thanks to Nate and the team at Pentz Homes for tuning into the podcast. Big thanks to everybody who is tuning in here, either live or after the fact. We really appreciate all the support. Again, if you want to lend direct support to us, patreon.com/SodaSoccer is where you can do that. For Dominic Jose Bazonio, I am Jeremy Rushing. This has been 10,000 Pitches, and we will see you next week.